Mind.
Welcome back to the Reier on YouTube channel. Travis Reier back with another edition of Second Helping. This one on a Wednesday night. We are live on the channel on this Wednesday night, joined as always by my great friend, co-host, Mr. Brent Beaird, a longtime college football analyst for First Coast News down in Jacksonville, Florida. Brent, of course, also a voter, and I'm going to ask Brent about this about 3 weeks into the season, kind of who's got his attention as a Heisman Trophy voter. We'll get into all of that tonight, Brent.
Absolutely.
We got some big SEC matchups to get into. We got Georgia and Alabama on the bye week in advance of that massive showdown in Tuscaloosa a week from Saturday. But still with Chino on board, our show mascot, we're ready to go.
Well, we are. It's great to be back, and he loves to make these appearances.
Absolutely.
I mean, he was sound asleep on the little screened-in porch, and soon as he heard your voice,
that's why we had a little bit of a delayed start because we didn't want to rustle Chino from his pre-show nap.
We
can't do that with Chino. He cannot be rushed. Tex Tider here in the show chat was asking about Chino. So there you go.
Appreciate that much. He's 16 years old. He's got some health issues that we are dealing with, but he is sleeping and eating and doing all the cat stuff every day. So we're quite grateful for that. But we've got a few cats.
Yeah, we're going to get into some cats,
tigers, and so forth. They're playing this weekend in the SEC.
We do. First, though, we're going to talk about some Gators and Dogs set for Saturday, noon Eastern in Starkville. The beleaguered bowl, I'd call this, for these two teams, given the last couple of weeks, especially Mississippi State. One thing to go on the road and lose in at least respectable fashion, on the scoreboard anyway, by the time it was over out in Tempe. But then to come home and get absolutely throttled by a MAC opponent. There's more MAC on this SEC schedule again this week too, but Toledo just hammered Mississippi State in Stark Vegas last week. Gators, obviously, rough situation right now with Billy Napier and where that appears to be headed. It's almost been day to day. There were rumblings again right after the loss to Texas A&M last week that he could be gone this week. It looks like he's going to make it to Starkville. And the Gators, after it's all said and done, Brent, 6-point favorites on the road on Saturday.
Yeah, that is that's just amazing when you think about it. And look, I mean, I've seen, like you have, about everything that you could see imaginable. There's a list of possible replacements and the in the odds with that. This is an interesting question here. Is Las Vegas puts out the odds on the games, but Trev, one things they put out too are the odds on who either is going to get fired first, or if they know who's going to get fired, who are the possible replacements. I'm just curious how much action they might get out of something like that.
Oh, they get plenty. I mean, people will bet on anything. If you've ever been to a casino in Reno or Vegas, as soon as they can open that window in those sports books, there's typically a line already formed it. However early in the morning they open. So, and a lot of them, they don't ever close, if you notice. But, it's a tough situation. It's going to be interesting with that quarterback situation still for Florida. Graham Mertz, DJ Lagway. As we talked about, the problems are far more extensive than just the quarterback position. Mississippi State, talk about Jeff Lebby's team and the embarrassment of that performance against a good Toledo team. Don't get me wrong, but the game really wasn't competitive. And when you look at this game, you're talking about the two worst rushing defenses, I think, in the SEC right now, which may be a good thing for Florida, because I still think Florida with Montrell Johnson and those backs have a better chance of running the football in this game than probably even Mississippi State does.
Yeah, I would agree. And there's some decent players in this game, but to your point, I mean, Florida nationally my stars, the defense is 106, and there's 133 teams. Scoring's 94, rushing's 102, and passing's 92. So in turnover margin, they're -4 and at 118. So, boy, the numbers just don't hold up at all with that. And one thing about State, Jeff Lebby in his first year, this is a young club. They're rotating backs, Johnny Daniels, Devon Booth, Keon Lee, Chapin, who I think both of us like. He's thrown for over 800 yards, 7 touchdowns, just 1 turnover at this point, and Kevin Coleman's doing okay. But I tell you what, and I've heard this all week like you have, Florida really doesn't need to lose to a first-year team and the team with maybe the worst defense in the nation, besides himself to some degree. I'm curious what you've heard, and I'll be brief about this. I mean, there's some talk about it. If it's debacle again for Florida, could they do something with the bye week coming up next week? But you also hear this, and this is legitimate. I heard this from some national media today, that if they fired him, who in the world would they put as the interim? Because
that's been my question all along. I mean, when I look at that staff, I go, all right, I mean, typically a staff, there's one guy that you can kind of look at and go, yeah, that would make sense there. And I think Napier is the kind of guy that, other than the on the field product, I don't worry about him embarrassing my program in a lame duck situation.
Right.
You know what I mean? We've seen coaches in successful situations that were at the assistant level that couldn't handle success before they were moving on to another job and had to go before the end of the season. See Lane Kiffin at Alabama in 2017. But no, I could see them staying with Napier. Because I think the decision's already been made. Now, who knows? Maybe he can rally this thing. But when I look at this football team, I just don't see enough quality pieces to make a run in this league, in this era of SEC football. So it's going to be interesting to see how I saw the bye week, after the Miami loss, and thought, if that's when you're going to go interim, that's when you would do it. And then my next thought was, well, who on that staff would you go interim with? So. Problems aplenty for the orange and blue. What about the Kentucky Wildcats? This almost feels like you worry about Kentucky having a letdown after a win.
Yes.
Because Kentucky played Georgia off its feet last Saturday night at Kroger Field. So Ohio comes in as a 2-1 team from the MAC. I got to think, though, the best friend for someone like Mark Stoops or some of these other teams we're going to talk about with MAC opponents this week, including Texas A&M, is just show them Toledo, Mississippi State last week and say, you don't think we have to show up? Just look at that game. So that should help Kentucky. Ohio can play a little defense. Kentucky, the defensive performance against Georgia obviously was very good. But Kentucky can let teams like Ohio make this thing ugly. The next thing you know, you're in the fourth quarter battling for your life.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And look, the other concern for Kentucky is they've had 2 games now without scoring a touchdown.
Yeah.
So that's something that's got to correct itself. And again, I love the toughness and the moxie of this Wildcat team against Georgia here. And look, they've got some pieces here. Their running back, Demi Sumo, help me on this. Kornbaya, we'll get that right soon. He had nearly 100 yards. So I was impressed with that. Now, how they've got a couple of good running backs in Anthony Tyus and Ricky Hunt. So they've got to do their due diligence as far as defense is concerned. But I just wonder, Trav, can they put together in the next few weeks another Georgia type performance and maybe get their, I won't say so much annual upset, but a game that could really make a difference in turning this program around this year?
Well, dropping that South Carolina game at home for me took what looked to be a given for a ninth straight bowl
Yes,
game for Kentucky
yes.
and put that into flux. Almost
Mm-hmm.
feels like you're going to have to get one. Maybe you might end up having to get one somewhere else on the
Yeah,
schedule. And so
true.
we'll see how that plays out too. Tex Hyder chiming in here. He wants to know, Brent, are the Cats Chino's favorite team? Would
Yeah,
make sense, right?
yeah.
Kentucky,
That's right.
that would make sense.
He loves Tigers and he loves Wildcats.
There
So
you go.
yes.
There we go. We're going to talk about some Tigers coming up next because the Bruins of UCLA are going to make that trip to Baton Rouge. LSU, a whopping 24.5-point favorite over UCLA, who was
Wow.
hammered last Saturday in the Rose Bowl by Kurt Cignetti in the
Yeah.
Indiana Hoosiers.
Oh, yes.
Kurt Cignetti on that rapid ascent up the head coaching ranks now, former Nick Saban assistant at Alabama. Boy, Deshaun Foster's got a tough situation at UCLA.
Really does.
And LSU, it was disjointed at times. It was borderline catastrophic at times at South Carolina last week. But at the end of the day, LSU gets a much needed win over South Carolina. An opportunity. This is an interesting game, too, because it's a mid-afternoon kick.
It is.
In Baton Rouge. You don't typically see that, but Garrett Nussmeier, we talked about this earlier in the week. It looks like maybe LSU has found a little something in the run game with the young back who had a couple of touchdowns in Columbia last weekend, but this should be an opportunity for LSU to get a split of the LA teams here in the first month of the season.
Yeah, no doubt. Caden Durham is the guy that you're talking about who really almost had 100 yards. Josh Williams still played 40 snaps, so he certainly is hanging in there, and he's doing well. The defense really played well at times, and then at times you turn around, they're giving up explosive plays, such as Rocket Sanders' run. Brandon Swinson on defense, 3 sacks and 5 total tackles. So he's coming along. Also, they've got UCLA, South Alabama. Then they got a bye week, big game in October with Ole Miss. UCLA really just kind of puttering along right now. Ethan Garber's their quarterbacks, barely over 50%. They're running the ball about 3.5 yards a carry. But, Trav, this is typical LSU, is it not? I mean, when you think about the schedule, they should be undefeated right now, beating Southern Cal and South Carolina. But on the other hand, if they don't beat South Carolina, Trav, they've already got 2 losses in September.
There could be an argument to be made they should be 1-2.
Yeah, absolutely.
That they should have lost to South Carolina last week after losing to USC in the opener. But yeah, this is not a good UCLA team. You mentioned Garbers. I think he's 1 touchdown pass to this point, 3 interceptions. So could be a good week for this LSU defense to feel maybe a little bit better about itself. Let's talk about some more Tigers. This time, the Auburn Tigers in one of those 3:30 games Eastern time set for Saturday at Jordan-Hare Stadium. This is an intriguing matchup. Arkansas making the trip from Fayetteville. Arkansas with a helter-skelter performance against UAB last Saturday. We see the quarterback change at Auburn. Initially, at least, there's some positive returns in that regard. We're obviously going to learn a lot more about that this weekend. And that's really where it starts. I think if you could count on Talon Green to not do a couple of the inexplicable things that I've seen him do in a couple of starts so far this season, his last 2 starts, Oklahoma State, UAB last week, I'd feel really good about Arkansas's chances getting 3.5 on the road. I think there's a lot of people out there that are going to pick Arkansas
probably
in this game, but I still, with Talon, I still have some trust issues in terms of how much he just values the little things. And I don't think ball security is a little thing, but when I watch him, I just don't see where he values it much at all.
No. Would Trav, would Tom Coughlin say that he has a callous disregard for the football?
I think sometimes you could say that.
Yeah. And what's interesting about this game is the quarterbacks are going to get a lot of the press. But Trav, could we say early? And I don't know if I really want to put Heisman here yet, but between Jarquez Hunter and Jaquindon Jackson right now, that's two of the better running backs in the league.
Yeah, if you're an Auburn fan, we talked about this earlier in the week. You love seeing Hunter do what he did last week. And Jaquindon Jackson's a real deal, big time, upper echelon SEC running back. And they've got a little bit of a big three working with Andrew Armstrong at the wide receiver position. I think one of these defenses will be the difference in the game. I guess it's kind of a homecoming, right? For Arkansas defensive coordinator Travis Williams, played at Auburn. So there's that part of this thing. I got trust issues though with both these teams. I think again the opportunities will be there for the Auburn defense because of how Taylor Green plays the quarterback position. Can Auburn capitalize on those? Is something we'll be waiting to see Saturday at 3:30. The Vanderbilt Commodores, the reward for not taking care of business in Atlanta against Georgia State last Saturday night. Now you get to go to Como to take on the 7th-ranked Missouri Tigers. Missouri, a 21-point favorite in this 4:15 Eastern time game, set for the SEC network, Brent.
Trav, have those Georgia State students sobered up?
All 7 of them.
Yeah. As they rush the field during this time. Now, Eli Drinkwith, who has been mentioned for the Florida job, by the way, as we talked about. I mean, they're glad to be where they are, but he still says there's just something not quite right with this team. We talked about Blake Craig, the kicker, how he came through and did well. Brady Cook, I mean, he's completing 70% of his passes. He can run a little bit too. Nate Noel has picked up the pace a little bit.
Yep.
And we know what Luther Burton's already got 12 catches for 171 yards, and Marcus Carroll. So I think they're doing fine running the ball. Trev, I'm just wondering for our guy Diego, I think he's pretty tough character. Can he shake off that loss to Georgia State and Vandy be really ready to play in this game? Missouri's won the last 3 in the series, but man alive, what a feather in the cap for Diego, and they can somehow be able to take this in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I don't know if Diego Pavia is going to play well on Saturday, but I don't worry about Diego Pavia showing up and doing his damnedest to play well.
Absolutely.
I do worry about the psyche of that Vanderbilt defense. They just gave it up in the final minute of that Georgia State game. I mean, you're just thinking, well, maybe they'll give up a field goal here. No. I mean, they just got ripped, and it wasn't the only time Georgia State ripped them in that game. So that's where more of my concerns are for Vanderbilt in this game. Missouri's a better team. We anticipated Missouri winning this game going back to the preseason. Pavia gives it some shine in terms of Vanderbilt, but I worry more about Pavia in terms of getting him through 12 games based on the way he plays the position. I know they've got a little depth at the quarterback position, but they don't have another one of him. I mean, the physicality of this league is as tough as he is. Same thing I have with Jackson Dart of Ole Miss. Kind of the way they play the game. It's a little bit of whistling past the graveyard, I think, at times. Hey, let's talk about Bowling Green. Bowling Green, its last time out, played Penn State off its feet.
They sure did.
In State College, losing by a touchdown to the Nittany Lions. Now the Falcons will pick up a check in College Station and would like to catch some hungover Aggies, maybe, in this one after Texas A&M's rousing road win at Florida last week.
That Bowling Green's got a tight end, Harold Fannin, who is, I understand, number 1 in the nation among the tight ends in receiving. So he is certainly a real weapon. And our listeners, particularly our Missouri listeners, will remember Connor Basilak really well, who
quarterback.
Trav, Connor comes into the game with 922 career completions. that is only behind Will Rogers and Dylan Gabriel right now. So I'm not saying Bowling Green will win, but I'm with you. They can certainly do a really good job in playing a very tough team or in a tough game against A&M. So that's going to be fascinating to see in a lot of ways. And at this point, Trav, does and maybe with Marcel Reed they can do that a little bit. And I know they did against Florida, but man, I'm just wondering, an A&M team that struggled, particularly on the road, could they have gotten something together? And I'm just wondering when they kind of hit another gear and they can run off a little bit of a streak for them.
Yeah, if they play the way they did in Gainesville, they've got a chance. But I think it'll be interesting this week to see how they handle this. Because, again, Bowling Green can make this game difficult for Texas A&M if the proper respect isn't paid to this MAC opponent. And as I talked about earlier, if you're Mike Elko, you're beating that drum about Toledo hammering Mississippi State last Saturday night. Let's talk about primetime Saturday night. ABC, Norman, Oklahoma, the premium game. I guess you could point, some people will point to SC Michigan maybe as the bigger stage in college football on Saturday. Not me. I mean, this game to me is, we've been talking about this game for 3 weeks, especially in relation to it being Oklahoma's first SEC game in the conference. The Sooners welcome the Tennessee Volunteers. Tennessee, a ringing 7-point favorite. You got some home dogs in the league this week, Oklahoma being among them. You know, Oklahoma fans will hear me say this, and some of them already aren't happy with me because back in the offseason, I made the prediction, or at least submitted, that it was realistic to think that Oklahoma could start SEC play 0-3. Because I knew this game was coming. I knew Auburn on the road was coming after this. And then Texas and Dallas is the third SEC game of the season for OU. Now they'll probably not like me saying this game kind of reminds me of Alabama, Wisconsin from last week. Now hear me out. I'm not saying Oklahoma isn't clearly the better team when you think about Oklahoma and Wisconsin. But when I think about explosive play production, you know, I look at Tennessee like I look at Alabama in that regard. I look at Oklahoma somewhat like I look at Wisconsin. And, you know, I think the defenses are going to end up probably being about a wash in this game, Brent. And then it comes down to the offenses and who can hit some explosive plays. And right now, when I look at Tennessee, that's the team I see more capable, far more capable. I don't think Jackson Arnold's averaging more than 6 yards per pass attempt. And Nico's averaging almost like twice that. So that's where my eyes go initially. I don't know about you.
Well, my big thing with this game is, and we were very clear about this early on, is when you're in the SEC and you got to replace your entire offensive line, you don't do that overnight, as evidenced by Jackson Arnold has already been he's been sacked 9 times in 3 games. So going against this Tennessee defense, and it's funny that we're talking that much about the defenses in this game, but it's certainly going to be crucial. And there'll be a lot of talk about Heupel coming home and how that he was unceremoniously fired with that, but he certainly rebounded, and hopefully they've all made up at this point. I would think they would be, but I'm telling you, the defenses and the running backs, particularly the Dylan Sampson, who has had basically 100 yards in every game. Trav, I think they deserve equal billing as much as the passing game does for both teams.
Yeah, we could have some fun encounters between Dylan Sampson and Danny Stutzman for Oklahoma. Think about the potential for those meetings between those two in the middle of the OU there in Norman. Yeah, I think I think we know, or we feel very strongly about what this Oklahoma defense is, and that's that it's very legitimate.
Yes.
We've been hearing, and our eyes are telling us so far this season that Tennessee has, in fact, taken another big step on that side of the ball. And that's kind of where I go with Tennessee too. If Tennessee's defense is what we were told it was, and what we have seen a good bit of through 3 games, then Tennessee should win this football game on the road because explosive play potential, from what I've seen anyway of these two teams, is largely on the side of the Vols.
Oh yeah, I agree. And Trev, the question that has to be asked here: the ticket man, how excited is the ticket man about this game, Travis?
The ticket man's got to be pretty excited about it. I mean, this is history. This is history on top of everything else.
Really,
this isn't Oklahoma opening with Vandy, or a team that isn't as anticipated, a storied program like Tennessee. And by the way, Tennessee is pretty damn good on top of everything else. This is top 15 matchup. Oklahoma's a touchdown dog. No, the ticket man or the ticket woman, what a ticket person is very, very happy, and they're going to be very happy next week in Tuscaloosa too. How about that for a back-to-back? This game this week, the ABC primetime game, and then you're going to get it with Alabama, Georgia next Saturday night from Bryant-Denny Stadium. More action in the SEC, Brent, on Saturday. Akron, the Zips, headed down to Columbia to take on South Carolina. Now, look, again, we've used that Toledo example ad nauseum to this point, I think. Akron's just not very good. South Carolina used the whole tank last week against LSU, and that tough home loss that wasn't without controversy. It was one of those games where both head coaches, I think, sent stuff in to the Southeastern Conference for review.
Oh, no doubt.
In terms of officiating. But this should be a get-well opportunity for South Carolina Saturday night at Williams-Brice Stadium. This is an ESPNU game at 7:30.
Well, my big thing with this game would be how healthy is Lenore Sellers? Does Beamer just sit him in this game and play for Robbie Ashford and be able to run the ball? Because this is probably a game where they could do that as good as their defense is playing at this point. So, and look, I mean, Sellers is just kind of learning about what he needs to do in the SEC. And yes, as you said, that they're looking for a few less controversial calls than what they got when LSU was in town last week.
No doubt about that. And give Sellers credit. I think he's picked it up. I mean, that was, you go back to the Old Dominion start to open the season.
Ooh,
that was
rough.
That was scary for South Carolina fans. He picked it up pretty good at Kentucky, and then unfortunately had the injury last week against LSU. You know what we've got in Oxford, Mississippi Saturday night, Brent? We've got the I Was Fired by USC 2 Bowl with Clay Helton.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Head coach at Georgia Southern.
Oh, Lord.
Lane Kiffin, head coach at Ole Miss. Both these guys, prior to their current gigs, head coaches of the mighty Trojans. Clay, he got the Iggy like Lane, but I don't think he got it on the tarmac, right?
No, I agree with that. I the thing that really sticks out to me, and again, we consider the competition, but I mean, Ole Miss right now is averaging almost 700 yards a game, 692. Now, obviously, that will come down when they start really playing SEC defenses at this point. But the reality of that is, I mean, we knew they would be explosive, and we talked about Henry Parrish the other day, and my goodness, what they were able to do too. So I mean, Ole Miss, and again, Ole Miss, Missouri, among two of the teams in the conference who look to be taking care and taking advantage of an easy September.
They are. I'll give Georgia Southern some credit here too, because I loved Dirk Russell back in the day.
Oh,
Man, he was
yes.
running that triple option with Tracy Ham back in the
Yes.
mid '80s.
Love it.
Got that program going there in Statesboro. Pour one out for Irk Russell, the former Georgia defensive coordinator under Vince Dooley. And
Mhm.
Georgia Southern, you look at the 2-1 record and the loss to Boise to open the season.
Yeah.
I thought that loss looked better after what we saw from Boise
Yes.
against Oregon.
Right.
So, again, Ole Miss going to win the game easy,
Mhm.
but I gotta put a little respect on the GSU name here as Lane Kiffin and his team look to roll Saturday night, 7:45 Eastern from Oxford on SEC Network. We'll wrap things up for this week, Brent. Will it be Arch Manning in his first start for the Texas Longhorns as ULM comes
Mhm.
calling?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sounds like Sark's playing a little close to the vest, maybe even
Mhm.
during today's SEC media teleconference.
Right.
He might have tipped a little bit one way, but
Mhm.
I guess at this point, I would be surprised if it's not Arch out there first on
Yeah, I
Saturday night.
would too. Yeah, yeah. I don't think there's any doubt about it. And Trev, I believe we've got Arch Manning very possibly versus General Booty.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like the Manning name is massive, but
It is.
you're talking about General Booty, one of the
Yeah.
Booties,
Yes. Yes.
quarterbacking ULM.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I'll tell you this about Monroe, Louisiana, too, because I can get sidetracked pretty easy when it comes to food. There's a Chevron station in
Oh,
Monroe, Louisiana, that
right.
has some of the best food anywhere. Probably my favorite gas station in the continental United States is a Chevron there in Monroe. But Doug Peterson, head coach of our
Yeah.
Jacksonville Jaguars, that's where he played his college football.
Interesting.
That's about all the Monroe and ULM insight I can give you,
Yeah.
other than General Booty, which
Yeah.
is fire.
Yeah. Yeah. I understand that, but it would be Texas again. I mean, Texas. It was 56-7 over UTSA, which I still consider a pretty good football team, even though they've lost a lot of their players. We'll probably see something similar with that. They do. Sark is cautioning somewhat. He's concerned, Travis. They're losing too many players at a rapid clip. And look, you and I said early on when they enter the league, that's going to be. And my stories, they haven't really even got to the SEC part of the race yet. But when teams first come to this league, that's one of the first things they undergo is what it's like to be in that meat grinder where you look up about midway in the season and you're down half a dozen starters.
Yeah, I mean that's the reality, no doubt, uh, of this league. Absolutely, and we talk about this weekend too, and we understand it's a bye week for Alabama and Georgia again in advance of that big matchup 1 week from Saturday night in Tuscaloosa. Tex Tyder chiming in here says the bye week is the only thing that can slow down Bama's Ryan Williams. How about that? Yeah. Ryan Williams has been something else, no doubt about it. And we
Yes.
won't get too much into Georgia or
Mhm.
Alabama. I think, from a health perspective for some of these guys on both teams, this comes at a good point early in the season before they get together in this classic matchup. But, it's surprised. There's some things that surprise me maybe a little
Mhm.
bit about these teams when I look at Georgia and I see the Bulldogs 13th in the SEC in rushing
Yeah.
offense, Brent.
Yeah. Really.
But they're averaging 5.4 yards per carry, and 145 yards per game. But that number obviously will go up. Meanwhile, Alabama in rushing offense, uh, more in the top five there, averaging about 5.8 per carry already. This is the discrepancy that surprises me maybe the most. Alabama has 13 rushing touchdowns in 3 games,
Mm.
and Georgia has just 4.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, but I do think would you agree ETN
Yeah.
is cranking the motor and he
I still like Nate Frazier. I mean,
I
Nate Frazier,
agree.
if it's kind of like the Jags. I know I don't want to turn this into the Jag show, but there's an ETN on the Jags.
Yep. Yeah.
and there's Tank Bigsby behind
Yes.
ETN.
Right.
I like Tank Bigsby more
Yeah.
inside the 10 or inside the 20 than I like
Good
Travis
point.
Etienne.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think I like Nate Frazier maybe more than I like Trevor Etienne in that situation. But we'll see
Well,
how it plays out.
I do think there's some interesting questions coming up, and I get to this in a second. But Raylan Wilson, the linebacker, was SEC Co-Defensive Player of the Week. Tyron Ingram Dawkins, Co-Defensive Lineman of the Week. So the Dogs' defense certainly came through in what they needed, and Dominic Lovett did too. Trev, I mean, how could you? This is an obvious question, but the reality is, I really do wonder, particularly if Carson back in a game like last week, and we know where Brock Bowers is in the NFL, but Trav, that game last week, particularly in the fourth quarter, they would have leaned pretty heavily on Brock Bowers, would they not?
Yes, and that was the beauty of that, or Lad McConkey for that
Yeah,
matter. So,
true.
you appreciate Dom Lovett previously of Missouri and what he brings to the table, no doubt. Dylan Bell is a nice sort of Swiss Army knife on offense.
Yeah, agreed.
And Arian Smith, there's no question, can stretch the field, very dynamic playmaker. But you're just interested to see more and more how that's going to take shape. And ATN can catch it out of the backfield too. As you get into some of these matchups. I'll say this. I think Georgia likes the matchup with Alabama's defense. If they go by the 3 games to this point, I'm thinking they feel like in what they like to do at their core as an offense, and they haven't done it as much to this point. I think they feel like they're going to be able to get after Alabama in the run game and in the quick game to the perimeter against some of these corners and these perimeter defenders. And that's a lot of what Georgia likes to do under Mike Bobo. Again, explosive plays, those type of things. Alabama feels pretty good about that. But then when you look at Georgia defensively, with a guy like Malachi Starks on the back end, he makes it pretty difficult back there for offenses for that Georgia defense.
Well, and I'll say this, good and well, Georgia's looked really hard, Trav, at that, what was about 17-play drive that took, 7, 8, 9 minutes off the clock from Wisconsin. Kirby would be very happy to have a game like that, would he not?
He would. I'll say this for the Alabama defense too, though. They have given up a couple of those, actually.
Yeah, true.
Western Kentucky had one in the season opener. But we talk about explosive plays. Alabama has yet to give up a play of 30 yards or more offensively through 3 games. They've given up only 3 of 20 yards or more. Now, they've given up, 30, 31 of 10 yards or more. But then they've done a pretty good job, too, I think, in red zone in some situations, too, especially against South Florida in week 2. So, again, plenty of conversation for next week, but a big weekend upon us as we look ahead to Tennessee and Oklahoma. Interesting matchups, even where Florida and Mississippi State is concerned, because you don't know what the fallout of that could be one way or the other. It's going to be a fun weekend, Brent. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. It really should be all the way around. As we kind of settle in, that there'll be obviously a whole lot of hype going on at that point. And I'll end with this. You asked me about Heisman Trophy guys, but my stars, Trav, you could go with how many of them could we just get from this conference at this point? I mean, you've got
Jackson 3 quarterbacks minimum.
Yeah, Jackson Dart, Jalen Milroe, certainly
Carson Beck.
Yeah, no question. And we'll have some others who will come up. And look, I've always, as long as I voted for this award, I've always wanted it to be a defensive award. If there was a defensive guy who is worthy of that, I've never thought worse of the defensive side of the ball. I know that won't happen, but boy, and even some of the defensive players, some of the ones that we've mentioned, so far this year have just really been quite unbelievable. But it's going to be, we'll monitor that and look forward to early next week as we kind of review what happened.
Thinking about that Tennessee-Oklahoma game before we get out of here, I think there's going to be at least one non-offensive touchdown in that game.
Yeah, good point.
I could see that. I mean, Tulane had one against Oklahoma, I think, last week. So should be fireworks aplenty.
Well, and let me say this, and it's outside the conference, and I'll be real brief. I'm telling you, I think South Florida, they're not going to beat Miami, but would it shock you at all, Trav, after seeing them, if they don't give Miami some problems?
They could, for sure. Yeah, I mean, if they get after Miami defensively like they got after Alabama a couple weeks ago, that game's in Tampa too, right?
Yeah, so, it is. It is. Absolutely.
I say there'd be a lot of Miami fans in Tampa, but there's not a lot of Miami fans in Miami. So.
Oh, yeah. Well,
maybe there won't be. Maybe it really and South Florida has a passionate fan base. I mean, I got a relative of mine that's a USF grad. He was in Tuscaloosa, 2 weeks ago. He goes and he'll be there. And then a lot of folks like that.
Well,
I think they're opening up the upper decks even at Raymond James for that game. Yeah.
And Trav, my final note here. If Cal beats Florida State after beating Auburn and Florida State, Trav, they're 3-0 for the first time in 5 years.
Put them in the playoff. Put them in there.
Yeah, but look, would it take Florida State to be 0-4 for them to make a quarterback change with Uiagalelei?
Ooh. They got to be getting close. And again, though, I hate throwing it all on the quarterback because when I've watched Florida State, I thought the season opener against Georgia Tech, they got pushed around.
They really did.
As much as anything. That was an indictment on their lines of scrimmage more than it was even DJ.
No question.
DJ at the end of the game put Florida State in a position to win the game.
He did. To his credit, yes.
And then you can't stop Haynes King in the Georgia Tech offense. So, just for maybe morale at that point, you probably kind of like what Auburn was going through.
Yes.
With Peyton Thorne and, that situation and, some of the stuff you see. And when it gets going south early,
that's
gets
tough.
late. When it gets late early, tough place to be, Brent.
Yeah.
Hey, Brent, as always, a lot of fun, my man. Look forward to recapping week 4 with you early next week. We'll do it.
Good. But have a great week. We'll look forward to it.
For Brent Beaird, Travis Reier, thanking you and reminding you, if you haven't subscribed to our channel here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for us. Turn on those notifications. That way you're alerted to all of our content here as it drops on the channel. And if you don't mind, a thumbs up, a like would help us out tremendously as well. And of course, the show also is available in podcast format. You can find us on iTunes. You can find us on Spotify, pretty much anywhere you do your podcasting. That's where you will find Second Help. For Brent, I'm Travis. Thanks again. Till next time. So long, everybody.